Hey, what's going on, everybody? It is day 49, and we're reading Leviticus chapter 16 through Leviticus chapter 18. Before we get into our recap for today, I want to thank you for joining us in this video, and I hope you're enjoying the yearly Bible reading program. Hopefully, you have already accepted the invitation. If you haven't, please check the description box below, and there you will find a link directly to the YouVersion Bible app, and there you will find several people across the country reading the Bible every single day and leaving feedback on the things they are learning and discovering from God's Word. So we'd love for you to be a part of the community, and I believe you'll be blessed by the conversation that is happening every single day. So today we are continuing our read in the book of Leviticus, and I hope you are not discouraged. Hopefully you have stuck through this and you're still reading, or you're sticking through this and you're still reading. It is quite an interesting read, and obviously there's so much to gain out of this. But I think there's a recurring theme that we see every single day, and that is the expectation that God has for his people to remain holy. And that word holy simply means to be set apart. It does not mean to be perfect. It means to be sacred. It means to be separate for functional use. It's like what happens whenever we take a dish or we take some sort of china and we set it aside for a special purpose. It's like what we do when we choose our favorite cup or coffee mug. It's actually what we do when we take dirty dishes, we wash them, we put them in a separate container or compartment because they have been separated from the dirty dishes and they're now ready for use. So when we think about what happens in the book of Leviticus, what we're seeing is the prescription for usability, for function. What does God want in order to use us for his glory and for his purpose? So we see these things coming up, and it seems a bit ritualistic, but it's so much more to that. Yes, they were expected to be ritually pure, but there's a reason for it. And I think we want to, as often as we can, highlight what that reason is. So Israel was chosen to be a separate and a distinguished nation from the rest of the world. And because they have the same problem that other nations in the world have, they need a solution. And we find that clearly explained in Leviticus chapter 16, where it talks about the Day of Atonement. It talks about this process of transferring the sins of Israel to what is called a scapegoat. It talks about the offering that is made not to just simply cover their sin, but for the first time perhaps in the year, and maybe even the only time in the year, their sins are not simply covered, but their sins are completely removed, forgiven, eradicated. It no longer exists. It goes as far as that scapegoat goes, and it is completely out of the mind and out of the sight of God. And what is all of this for? Well, it's pretty simple, I think. Even though it is a bit of a complex idea. The idea here is, yes, Israel has the same issue that every other human being and every other nation has, but God has a desire to be with Israel. He has a desire to dwell among Israel for the purpose of fulfilling his plans and his purpose in creation for the rest of the world. And this is the way in which God does that. Now, we see a lot of information here about what are you supposed to do as far as the blood of an animal? Are you able to eat it? And these are things that, again, are particular to the world that we're living in, because there were certain practices among ancient Near Eastern cultures and Mesopotamian cultures that were, in many instances, related to evilness, idolatry, or even what we would determine, or what Michael Heiser determines, the spirit world. So these commandments are not simply a way of God saying, this is what I want. Of course, that's what he wants, but why? Why do you want this? Well, I want it because I want you to worship me differently than another person who does not know me would worship their God. Notice the word that God uses for himself. God commands Israel to be holy because he is holy. Now think about what it means for God to be holy. Many people think God is saying, I'm holy among you. Like I'm holy among other men. So whenever God is in the room and he's there with all these other sinful men, he is proclaiming to the rest of the world, or those in that room, if you will, I am holy, so you guys got to be holy. That's not actually what's happening. What God is saying is you live in a world where there is a claim of other gods who supposedly exist. Well, what I want you to know is I'm not like those other gods. So when God says he's holy, he's not comparing himself to us. He's actually comparing himself to the supposed gods that exist in the other nations and the other cultures that Israel is surrounded by. And so what he's doing there is setting a distinction between himself and these idols, which in some translations, particularly in the Greek, the Septuagint, when you see the word idol, it actually is the word demon. So he's setting a separation, a distinction between himself and the other gods that are being created by the minds of individuals. And he's saying to them, in order for people to recognize the distinction between me and these other gods, they will know it by how you worship me. This is why we read in Leviticus chapter 18, God tells them in verse 3, do not act like the people in Egypt where you used to live, or live like the people of Canaan where I am taking you. You must not imitate their way of life. He tells them to obey his commands, his decrees, his regulations in a way to be distinguished, be different. And then he goes through a whole list of things that they should not do, things that other people are doing in their society, things that oftentimes draw a direct correlation between not only how they live in the world, but how they pay respect to their gods. Okay? Now, what the Lord tells us in chapter 18 is the reason why I'm taking you to this land is obviously to worship. But what does that look like? It looks like doing everything other than what these other nations are doing what I tell you to do, not what you see them doing. He goes into this very deep explanation of why he is actually kicking them out of the land. It is not because God's favorite people are Israelites and he just wants them to have the land that belongs to someone else. The reason why he is kicking the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, he's kicking them all out of the land because they pollute the land. They desecrate the land. Their behavior is destructive to the land that they are occupying. And if you will, God is exiling them in the same way he exiled Adam. Man, there's a huge correlation there. You got to think about, why would God put Adam in the land or the garden? And perhaps what was he trying to address by putting Adam in the garden? Could it be, I'm just being speculative now at this point, but could it be that Adam was a solution to a problem we have not yet discovered or will never discover because it's not written about? I'm just speculating. I'm just drawing the parallel between what we're reading in the book of Leviticus, where God is saying, I'm driving them out to bring you in. And it seems to be some sort of parallel where God says to Adam, I'm bringing you in. But the question bears in my mind is, what was going on before that? Or at least what's going on around the context in which God allows this to be so for Adam in that garden. But that's neither here nor there. Let's just go a little further into what we read in chapter 18. In chapter 18, what he says, because the entire land has become defiled, I am punishing the people who live there. I will cause the land to vomit them out. You must obey all my decrees and regulations. You must not commit any of these detestable sins. So he's saying to them, the reason I don't want you to be like them is because what they were doing is destructive to my land. And for some reason, God sees that space as sacred and his own possession, and he wants to protect it with individuals or by individuals who will respect and steward the resources that he has given them to manage. So this is what's going on here. And this is why reading the book of Leviticus becomes so incredibly important and so valuable, because you get to see what that distinction looks like in the world that we're reading about. And we'll continue to see that as we go through chapter 19, 20, 21, 22. All right, so let's keep on reading. Hang in there, guys. We still got a lot to read. We're still moving through the biblical narrative. Everything is still tying together. We are developing principles. One of the principles I would say is very important is the principle of distinction. If you want to be trusted by God, if you want to be used by God, you have to be willing to stand out and be unlike everyone else who may have no respect to the will, the purpose, and the holiness of God. So let's do that. Let's find creative biblical ways of doing that, not just ritual, traditional, religious ways of doing that. Let's do it in a way that reflects the principle and the purpose God has established in His Word. So until next time, let's keep on reading. I want to hear what you have to say. Please leave a comment in the comment box below. Let me know how you're making it through Leviticus. How are you enjoying it? Or is it easy? Is it difficult? What are some of the things you're experiencing? And I'd love to hear and conversate around that. But until next time, thank you for watching. Take care. God bless. And remember, live by the Word.